It starts with you. And for that reason, it's important that you invest as much time as you would invest in your leadership strategies or styles or helping others or leading the way. Spend that same amount of time investing in yourself as a leadership, because it has to start from self.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bliss Sibiya.
And I'm Jade Farrel.
And welcome to TLT Talks, where we speak about all things personal and leadership development. Now, before we start with this podcast, may I kindly influence you to follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Spotify, we're on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel because we really want to get in touch with you and hear exactly what you have to say on the topics that we are discussing today. Yo, that rhymes, man.
That sounds really good.
Yes,
but you
sir.
are quite the rhymer, though.
I mean, you know.
It just comes naturally for Bliss.
I'm out here freestyling. All right, man. Jay, so how you doing, first of all?
I'm good. I'm doing good. I can't believe we're going into winter season right now, but I feel like sometimes seasons in the physical also reflect seasons in the internal. So it does kind of feel like internally I'm also going into a bit of a winter season.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying.
No,
so,
I got you.
But it's good. It's good in the hood. How about you, Bliss?
Nah, I'm good, man. I'm all good in the hood. Just as you mentioned yourself, everything is fine and blessed. Just enjoying the sun outside. You know, everything is going well so far. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have today.
Definitely. All things leadership.
Yeah, today we're just going to pick on each other's brains. You know, based on the conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago in PE, you know, when we were doing a facilitation, we spoke about leadership as influence. So based on that conversation from that time, I really just want to sit down with you and, you know, pick your brain, because at the end of the day, we are just here to learn, right?
Exactly. So let's get it. Let's get it going. Let's go for it. Let's pick each other's brains.
All right.
And hopefully the brains of our listeners as well.
Exactly. And if you have your own perspective, please do share in the comments, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to learn. So if you have a different view based on the conversation that we're having today, please feel free. We don't bite. We want to learn from you guys as well, because we're not experts, but we are keen observers of what's going on in the world today, especially with all things leadership.
That's right.
All right. So without further ado, the first question for you, Jade, is how would you define leadership and influence?
So I think something that I've really come to liking in terms of the definition of leadership, you know, since being with TLT, my mind and my view around leadership has really expanded. I think it's not two separate concepts. Leadership is influence. And that is something that we massively talk about within all of our workshops that we do. And when it comes to TLT, Tomorrow's Leaders in Training, like if you want to be a leadership, it's about looking at or if you want leadership, you need to start by looking at where your spheres of influence are and start rolling it out in those areas. You don't have to go and find leadership in a corporate company as a CEO or COO. You know, leadership is where your influence is and the way that you roll out that influence in whatever sphere you'll find yourself. So when it comes to leadership and influence, I no longer see these things as two separate things. It's one thing and it goes together. It meshes together quite well. And I really think that, you know, in terms of just leadership itself, the approach to what leadership is or has to be, in my opinion, is servant-hearted. A leader is also not a dictator. Those are two separate words. You don't look up the definition of leadership and dictatorship in the same page or with the same definition in the dictionary. It's not the same term. And I think we've come to a time or kind of like a cultural awareness where people are really actually being open-minded about the fact that leadership is no longer, you know, how strenuous your boss gets and calling you out at your desk. Like, that doesn't make him a leader. It's about the way that he takes a servant or she takes a servant-hearted approach and the way that they handle and carry themselves and the way that they lead others in a less dictatorship kind of view and more in a servant-hearted approach.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with you there. For me, defining, leadership and influence, I remember based on the workshop that we had the last time, gathering the research, if you break down the word leadership and you see the origins of it, leadership is essentially pathfinder. So as a leader, you finding a path for people, just like when Martin Luther King says, I've seen the promised land. He's saying that he's found a path. He may not be there with you, but there is a path. There is a promised land. And then with influence, it coming from a Latin word, influenta.
Oh, yes.
That is also an inflow. So when something comes in, it is influencing because of a specific outflow. So when someone says you have influenza, it's something coming in. It's a sickness coming in. And as a result of that, the outcome is you're going to be sick. So if you come in with influence, you're coming into a space, whether it's a community, it's a business, it's a school, you are going to change something because there will be a desired outcome no matter how you look at it. But it's definitely intertwined because without leadership, there's no influence. Without influence, there's no leadership. So it's a beautiful mesh. It's a beautiful, beautiful mesh that comes in.
Absolutely. And I just absolutely love the way that you're describing that as well. And I think it's important to take into account, what you're saying and just the origin of these words when we actually just go look at the base and the core of it itself and seeing how that goes together. Yeah. Sometimes we lack understanding because we don't know the basis of what it is that we are trying to describe or explain. And just as simple as going back to the roots of something can already say a lot about it. And I love the way that you just broke that down. And on that note, Bliss, why do you think influence is important when leading?
I really think that influence basically sets the tone of what's going to happen next. Before you are considered a leader, you have to have influence. I would prefer having a person that is very influential lead me. But that is like the grade one. It is the foundation. If you find a person of influence, they are determined to lead. It's kind of like in school where you get that bully. That bully has influence. He has the influence to make people laugh or to do something crazy. But if you give that person like a leadership role, you will see the change. But it all starts with influence, the inflow. And then that could come out as leadership. It's just, the foundation is just important. So influence is definitely a pivotal part because it's an inflow at the end of the day. Inflow to finding a path.
Exactly. And I think what's important with what you're saying right now is I suppose anyone can be placed in a leadership role and use their influence for different things. Like someone placed in a leadership role influencing negatively, that's going to be the outflow of that. It's going to be a negative outcome. But if you put in the positive, you will find out the positive. And I think that's really important when it comes to leadership styles as well. Everyone is different. Look, I think that's the other thing is not everyone will lead the same. And we also cannot have a cookie cutter expectation of what a leader should or shouldn't be. I think it's all about how that leader handles himself or herself in any given situation, even in the most unexpected, and what that inflow is left with when they walk away from that situation. What have they left? What have they imparted? What has flowed into? Really, really, really important.
Yeah, no, this inflow is definitely part of the lingo here, huh?
Absolutely.
No, I got
it's your word. You coined it, my friend.
Nah, it's the Latin word.
Ay.
Shout out to Latin, And then number 2, how would you differentiate influence versus manipulation?
Sure. I think that's the big part of the conversation that we really kind of need to touch on when it comes to the differentiation I was trying to make between leadership and dictatorship. And influence is not manipulation. I think anyone listening thinking, well, if a leader or a person is influencing me to make a certain choice, surely I'm being manipulated. But I also think there's a distinct difference between those two. It doesn't cross over. It doesn't flow with each other. Yeah. Manipulation is, to basically leave someone with no other option than choosing a certain path or given a certain choice, not out of their own will, but based off of the fact that they have been manipulated to make that choice. And I think with leadership and influence, You aren't giving someone a forced choice to make. You are imparting in them what you as a leader think would be the best route, the best path finder, and allowing them to make that choice for themselves still.
Yeah.
So not manipulating, but leaving a space open for choosing, but being the one that still shows the path and gives the others the option to choose it.
Yeah. No, I definitely resonate with that because, and it's always a question that pops up during our facilitations. And it's essentially saying that manipulation is you eradicate all the other resources and only put the resources that benefit you as the manipulator.
Sure.
Whereas with influence, it's like, here's what is out there. Would you consider that? Consider this because. Whereas with manipulation, it's like, there's no other way. There's really no other way. Here's what it is. And you can take it back to historic times, with the whole Nazis and Hitler.
Oh, yes.
Like how he did that was through propaganda. Like he's like, there's this information and only this information, which influenced the German population to have a particular impression or perspective towards the Jewish people.
Yes.
But if he was like, here's everything, here's the facts, not manipulated facts, these facts, but like the bigger picture, then you would see that the German population would have a different perspective on things. So that is the perfect way to find the difference between influence and manipulation. It's these small nuances because we always get to think that it's intertwined when it's really not.
Yes. And based off of leadership, I think if you go into the conversation of using examples like, Hitler and stuff, I know a lot of people do enjoy speaking about Hitler as someone who was a very good leader because of the fact that he was able to convince so many people of his cause. And I think it's really important for us just to go think about in whatever area you are involved in. Are you trying to convince people of your cause? And does that then make you a good leader? Then going back to the question of people stating how great a leader he was, what did he have to do to get into that position? And then what is leadership really? And there are a bunch of incredible, facts and books and material and quotes out there on leadership and what it is and what it isn't. And we can sit here and try and discuss one person and why they failed to be a leader and have someone else think that they might have been the best leader they possibly had. But just from your perspective, speaking about quotes and leadership material, what is one of your favorite quotes when it comes to leadership or even resources? Like books or podcasts when it comes to leadership?
My favorite is, and it's a TLT favorite as well, is John C. Maxwell. A leader is someone who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. It goes back to what a leader is, a pathfinder. Think of yourself as a tour guide. You need to know exactly what the environment is so that you can influence the customers or the clients that you know the way. Follow me. It is safe if you are with me. So I have to influence. I have to communicate that. So John C. Maxwell just hits the nail on the head with that quote. A leader is someone who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way.
And I like the beginning of that quote because it speaks of something that is a responsibility of the leader. It starts off by saying, knows the way, shows the way. So as leaders, it's our responsibility to make sure that we know before we influence and try and inform others. There's a certain type of task that is at our hands at first glance of leadership when I think about what I'm hearing in that quote is, yes, show the way, but first know the way, my friend. And I'm not saying a leader needs to be perfect either. I'm not saying there won't be situations where you are faced with situations or scenarios that you haven't been in before. But it's about being knowledgeable about how you lead and what you are leading people to before you even lead them to that way.
Exactly. That quote just sums it up, as you said, like the 3 stages. You first have to know, which is the knowledge. Then you go, you have to experience it, and then show. Because as a leader, you don't want to hoard information. You need to share it with the world. And I think that's what TLT does. We get the information, we inquire, and then we equip ourselves, and then we inspire. So it works hand in hand. What's your favorite one, by the way?
I love that. There are so many. I think there's a lot of John C. Maxwell that's also coming to mind now. And, especially when you're talking about that. But I can't define my favorite part of leadership in just one quote. But what I would recommend, and this is the part where I was talking about like quotes and resources. One of my favorite people to listen to when it comes to leadership and leadership resources.
Yeah.
And you can quote them every second of the day and you will never even run out of quotes to say, is Simon Sinek. Absolutely love Simon Sinek's material.
Beautiful.
When it comes to leadership. I'm a big fan of Craig Rochelle as well. And he does host the Global Leadership Summit every single year. Worldwide, not just in America. And I think, as a leader, again, it's about equipping yourself and being knowledgeable about what it is that you want to lead people to. So I can't just give you one quote, but I would rather say some of my favorite resources, which is the above mentioned.
I got you. That's beautiful, man. And then when it comes to, because you've mentioned the Simon Sineks and those people that speak about leadership. What are your top 5, or who are your top 5, rather, leaders, dead or alive?
I like that, dead or alive. Okay, so definitely these that I mentioned, really, 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 really love Craig Rochelle, really love Simon Sinek, Jay Shetty, John C. Maxwell, definitely on the list. You quoted him as well. I think he's the OG when it comes to leadership. And then, oh my goodness, I got to give it to TD Jakes. Definitely. Those are my top 5.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. For my top 5, I'm probably going to go a different route. For me, at the moment, it's Angela Merkel. I feel like what she did when she was still the vice chancellor, what she did for Germany and Europe as a whole, that leadership approach, even though, you can love or hate her, but what she did during her tenure was just amazing. Then there's also, the vice chancellor of Stellenbosch, also the owner of, Rembrandt, all these big companies that are in South Africa. I feel like where I'm going with this, Johan Rupert. If you speak about it from an influence perspective, the man has influence. He is the OG. Love him or hate him as well, he has influence. If he says that he's worried about certain aspects within the country, Brussels would be the first people to phone him. New York would be the first people to phone him, because he does have influence. In academia, in economy, even amongst his friends, he has influence. So he's definitely there. And then you go down to your Nelson Mandela's, for obvious reasons. And then it's just, there's a lot of people. And then there's Richard Branson for me.
Oh, yes.
Richard Branson, the way he leads, he's more of a free reign, laissez-faire, but he's a leader in his own right. And then it also goes to your Simon Sineks. There's a lot of people that have their different ways. And it's like, each and every perspective is just amazing. It's a marvel to watch. It really is.
Absolutely. And I think when you speak about the types of leaders that really have influenced you and the way that you see leadership, that also brings us to leadership styles, because all these different leaders that we are mentioning each have a different style of leadership. So what type of leadership style do you think you have, given some of the examples that you've mentioned as well?
No, that's interesting. I think for me, and I'm probably going to be lazy with this one, but it's situational leader. I lead based on situation, because if you look at it from a situational leader perspective, it states by definition that you lead based on the environment. If the environment influences you, therefore you need to influence something within that environment. So for me, it's situational leadership. If you have examples such as, in Rwanda in 1994, there was a genocide between the Hutus and the Tutsis. There was that situational leader that was like, listen, we have to fix these. You have to fix the atrocities that is going on, the genocide. And that man is Paul Kagame. It was based on a situation.
Sure.
And certain situations require you to be autocratic. Some require you to be transformational. Others require you to be free reign. Others require you to be democratic. So it's all these different types of styles in one, based on the influence of the environment.
Okay. And would you say that in those situations, would you be someone who leads from an emotional or a logical perspective?
That's a very good question. For me, I think I would lead from a logical perspective. I'm not really one, and this is a personal thing. Emotions, for me, I kind of struggle with it. So it's always for me to go for a rational approach, more logic, and just see things from a logical perspective.
That's it.
And then I'll cry about certain things later. But if that moment arises where if everyone is crying, everyone is emotional, I have to be that person, then I will do it. And then later on, I can then, the aftershock, then probably tremble, shed a few tears. But in that very moment, I'd rather go the logical route and just get out of that situation and influence people to follow me, even if they are emotional.
Yes.
I think that's how I would go about doing it.
I like that. And I think, one of the styles that you did not mention there that, I'm definitely, that's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Not the problem, but I think that's the style. It's me. You were talking about democratic. I'm a very diplomatic person in the sense that, my leadership is very much based on what does my people want and fighting for that. And so for that reason, I'm also a very emotional based leader, because it's all about, I get very caught up in what is the need?
Yeah.
What is the cause? Tell me about your problems and your issues, and let me go fight for that on your behalf. So I do often enjoy being the voice for the people that don't necessarily feel like they are the voice. But I think in that style itself, sometimes it can be flawed. And just in every style that there is, whether you take a diplomatic or a democratic, a logical or emotional approach, again, going back to looking at yourself as a leader holistically, what is it that you need to grow in? What is it that your people that you are leading, or the path that you are showing, where is it that you are going? Why are you going there, and how are you going to get them there? That always needs to be in question, because we can never stay the same. And we can also never be alone. No man is an island, and we are changelings. And in whatever style or approach we have, I think it is important for us to always self-lead, self-develop, and self-grow, and then take that and share that amongst others.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's amazing. And then with that said, do you think that your environment creates the leader?
Yes, I think it's a definite yes. And that can be anything from the environment that you grow up in to the situation or the environment that you are placed in as a leader. It is very much dependent on who that leader is and becomes as a person. The way you are raised, your trials and your tribulations, it doesn't make you a sorry for himself leader. It can make you the best leader this world has ever seen. Or it can turn you into someone who tries and forces that kind of love and openness and celebration of who that person is, and that need for human affirmation by becoming a very diplomatic, or not a diplomatic leader, a very dictatorship style leader. I think your environment plays a lot in how you lead, who you lead, how you lead the people.
Yeah.
But it's not, the circumstance isn't necessarily a recipe to how that leader will turn out, or how that person will turn out.
Yeah.
But a leader is a leader, and showing the path based on what he or she has experienced. So it is circumstance-based. It is situation-based, in my opinion.
Yeah. No,
I don't know what our viewers think or what our listeners are feeling. And this is the part where we want to hear their voice in the conversation. I think, in which way would you say you view it?
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I also agree with it. If you go to the documentaries, and if those documentaries that do bios on leaders,
Yes.
and you always find that they always take it back to the childhood, to the community. I remember I was watching a video or a documentary about Kim Jong-un.
Oh, yes.
And the CIA and the FBI were always like, let's see what he was like at home and what personalities came out there, because that also does have an influence on the type of leader that you are. I mean, if you to speak about Putin, they always go back to when he was born, how the Soviet Union affected him, the Berlin Wall, all of those things. So that kind of has an influence, not maybe 100%, but in order for you to know how to negotiate with someone or have a conversation with someone, and that's where the emotional intelligence comes in, is that you need to look at their childhood, because there's certain traumas that come out, there's certain fears that come out. You mentioned that you're diplomatic, where you fight for people. Something in your past probably led to you wanting to fight for people, and that is where you need to go into the crux. So I definitely agree that, in the past, there's certain things that do shape you to become a particular type of leader, and it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And you can also decide, how that shapes you. It doesn't have to decide for you. And based off of that, can we make a statement as bold as to say that anyone can become a leader? I think that is my question for you, Bliss, is do you think anyone can become, or not become, be a leader?
Absolutely. I really do believe that a person can be a leader. I mean, leadership is taught. Because it's taught, it means that if you learn it, it's a skill. And because of the fact that, as malleable, our brains are malleable. And the fact that we have influence, remember I said influence is the foundation. All of us have influence in something. Therefore, we have the ability to lead. It's something that can be taught. So I definitely, without a doubt, say that leadership is definitely something that can be taught, and influence is definitely the foundation for that as well.
And I think that just brings me back to, something that I want to, wrap up this conversation with is self-leadership is very important. Again, just thinking about the quote that you mentioned from John C. Maxwell, knows the way, goes the way, shows the way. It starts with you. And for that reason, it's important that you invest as much time as you would invest in your leadership strategies or styles or helping others or finding the path or how to explain that path or leading the way. Spend that same amount of time investing in yourself as a leadership, because it has to start from self in order for it to flow out. And nothing can flow if there's nothing to give. And I want to use this cup as an example. Like if there's not something to pour out of, how can I pour into your cup? Any thoughts on self-leadership?
Jordan Peterson says that before you go out and change the world, you have to make your bed. That statement in itself basically says that you can't go out and want to create or change or shape the world if you cannot handle what's going on within you. It goes with the same thing that they say charity begins at home.
Oh, yes.
Start with your immediate surroundings, but most importantly, start with yourself. If you're able to lead yourself, then that will influence, that will inflow and lead others.
Absolutely. For all our listeners and all our viewers, we just thank you for joining in on this episode of TLT Talks. And if you'd like to find out more about TLT or having a certain similar conversation with the areas that you are involved in, whether it be at a school, with leaders, in corporates, please reach out to us. We are all open to having these kinds of conversations and expanding the knowledge on leadership and on this topic. It's an important one that we should be having on the daily, and this will influence the way that we are in our schools, as teachers, educators, as corporate CEOs, or even just as, the little guy. So, what I mean by that is whether you are sitting in the penthouse suite or behind your desk, you can be a leader, and we have established that. And I think it's important that after today, you realize that and that you continue the conversation with us. So give us a follow on our socials if you have not yet. Click those buttons, the subscribes and the bells and the reminders and the whatnots. And please check us out and continue the conversation. We'd like to hear your thoughts on it. That's all for me from my side. Again, that was me, Jade.
And Bliss Sibiya.
And that's TLT Talks. Bye.